Hi, my name is Charles Pettaway. I am a professor of music at Lincoln University. I'm the chair of the music department. I'm a concert pianist and also a church musician. I started taking lessons when I was 6. And quite frankly, I started at 6 because I was a sickly child. I had asthma and couldn't play rough sports, football and baseball and things like that, because I'd always get out of breath. So my mom said, well, we come from a musical family. I have an aunt who was the organist at our local church, and I had a grandmother who was also an organist. So we have a rather musical family. And so I'd always go over to my grandmother's house, and she had an old upright piano. And, I'd always try to go in because it was locked, because she didn't want any of the children, playing on it. And I'd always go and try to fool with the hammers, trying to, make a sound with it. And I did it every time I went over there, and we went over there weekly. So my grandmother says, he might have a talent at the piano, so I'm going to give him this piano. So they made arrangements for me to get this upright piano. And they brought it to the house, and I started taking lessons, quite frankly, with, it was my Aunt Ida. She was my first teacher, and she was the organist at Galilee Baptist Church. So studying with her for, I guess, about a year or so. Then surprisingly, she told my mother, I can't teach him anything else, so he needs another teacher. I went to the Academy of Music in Philadelphia and heard a pianist, Rudolf Serkin. And he really inspired me the way he played. He had this bombast way of playing Beethoven. And it really inspired me. So I started really studying assiduously, I guess. And one thing led to another. And I graduated from Philadelphia Musical Academy. I got a scholarship to study at Fontainebleau. Now, studying at Fontainebleau, that was quite an experience because it was my first trip to France. And who did I study with but Nadia Boulanger? Now, I don't know if you know Nadia Boulanger, but she was the teacher of Leonard Bernstein, Samuel Barber, Quincy Jones. So, I studied with her. I mean, it was a great honor to work with her. And I remember all the students who were accepted at Fontainebleau, because they were all there, pretty much on scholarship, had to play for her. Well, I'm shaking in my boots. I'm playing for the great Nadia Boulanger, and, other students would go in and come out in fear and trembling. So I went in, and I was playing Prokofiev's 7th Sonata, Russian piece, which is quite famous. And she says, Pettaway, what are you going to play? I said, well, Madame Boulanger, I'd like to play Prokofiev. So I sat down and played the first movement. And then I thought that she would just light into me and say, well, this was wrong and that was wrong. She didn't say any of that. She just said, Pettaway, you have a God-given talent. I was shocked. I was shocked that she would say that to me. Well, other things happened too. She opened doors for me because there was a great tenor. His name was Gerard Souzet, and he was an interpreter of French music. And she said to me, Pettaway, I want you to accompany his master classes. And all the other students were saying, how'd you get to do that? I said, Madame Boulanger asked me to do it. So I accompanied him, and that, I didn't realize what a great honor that was. I didn't realize how great he was. And then other things happened. She told me, Pettaway, there's a competition. It's the Kasetsu competition here, and I want you to enter it. I had to learn quite a few pieces of music for that, and I really wasn't up for that, quite frankly. I had 3 weeks to learn Schumann Fantasy in C, the first movement. I did a Beethoven sonata. I did the Brahms F minor sonata, the big one. And then there was a piece by Kasetsu, his toccata, that I had to learn. On a Bach prelude and fugue. So I was practicing 9 hours a day to get all this stuff done. And then the night before or the day before, I had a bad asthma attack, a really bad asthma attack. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to play. But, the next morning I felt better. So I went and played and I won. Madame Cassetsu was on the committee, Jean-Jacques Panchot. The president was Nadia Boulanger, of course, and there were some other people. I think Zeno Francescotti, he was the violinist. He was also on the panel. So it was an august body. And so they gave me first prize. I guess I started teaching piano when I was about 12 or 13. Quite frankly, yeah, I had a lot of students. I was always a businessman too. So, I had a full studio. And then, as I became known more, then more people would call and ask, if can my child study with you? And, so, yeah. And, in the beginning stages, I was all business. I mean, I didn't really get to know the students so much, but just to teach them the basics of, hand position and legato and staccato touches and rhythms and things like that, some ear training, all standard things that most teachers teach. I love teaching theory, particularly advanced theory. When it comes to sonata forms and rondo forms, those different forms, and understanding the analysis of the chords involved, the breakdown of the chords, and then talking about the composer himself or herself, how they relate to the music and what they were going through. Students always want to know, well, if I'm studying this Beethoven sonata, how do I relate to Beethoven? And classical music today is becoming very esoteric. So is it part of the American fabric anymore, cultural fabric? I'd have to say that's why I use the word esoteric. I don't think so. I mean, it's dying. Pop music, hip hop and rap is just the rage of the country, and that's going to be, I think, the new classical music of America. My influences, were basically classical. Now, why did that happen? Because I had a sister, and she was into, R&B, at the time. And I listened to it, because my mom and dad listened to it. Screaming Jay Hawkins, Ray Charles, they listened to all that. But my mom also belonged to this classic record club. And so every month we'd get these new recordings: Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto, the Franck Symphony in D minor, Schumann-Rennes Symphony, Bach Brandenburg Concertos, Mozart Concertos, Ionesco's Romanian Rhapsody. So I grew up with all this music in our household because, my mother loved the music. But, it was a varied background because I had to listen to my sister's music as well. And then, of course, my dad liked spirituals, Negro spirituals particularly, Wings Over Jordan. I mean, he loved that a cappella group. Yeah, so it was because of my father that I got involved in jazz with Oscar Peterson particularly. So I started listening to all of his music as well. Well, very rarely do I like my performances. I try to be a perfectionist, and that's impossible. So for me, they're okay for me, but there's always something that's wrong. And I guess most musicians would say the same thing. when I did my first album of all Russian music. I did a Prokofiev Sixth Sonata and some Rachmaninoff preludes and a Tchaikovsky Dumka. I don't remember what else, but at any rate, yeah, I liked those recordings. I did, because, we did take after take until I got it right. So that was great. But in live performance, there's always something. Rarely does everything just go the way it's supposed to go. Artists think the same way. There's always something that can be better. Look, music is a living, breathing thing. And if you hear something today one way, or if I feel one way today, then next week, I might feel completely different. I might want to play it slower or faster or, more brooding or, whatever. So all of that, it plays in with how I'm feeling at the time. A lot of times I'm up, and so, it's better. But, I've never had a time where I've just completely fallen apart and say, oh my God. Some people, do things like, and then they stop and they try to, no, I've never done that. I can, if I have a memory lapse, well, right now I play with the music all the time. I don't trust my memory anymore. But at that time, if I had a memory lapse, I'd just keep going. My mom said to me once, I was invited to this, I guess I was around 12, to this banquet at Colonial Hall in Manayunk, PA. And I was playing Rachmaninoff's C-sharp minor prelude. And I had a slight memory lapse. And my mom is sitting there, oh my God, what's going on here? And I acted like it was just totally normal. So you got to be an actor as well. So actually, I did a series for the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. And I did it, 7 or 8 years ago. Do you realize they're still playing that whole series? I mean, you can see it on the educational channels or PBS. Because, as a matter of fact, I went to visit an old friend just last week who was retired from Lincoln. And as soon as I walked in, he says, I just saw you on PBS. I said, really? He says, yeah, you were doing that wonderful series on Le Chevalier de Saint-Georges. I said, they're still playing that? And I don't get any royalties for it either. I was teaching my intro to music class, and I was talking about classical musicians. The classical, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven. I happened to come across this guy, Le Chevalier de Saint-Georges, and they called him Le Mozart Noir, the Black Mozart. Who the hell is this? So I did some reading on him. This guy was incredible. Let me tell you a little story about him. First of all, he was born in Guadeloupe, the Caribbean. And his father was a wealthy sugar plantation owner. The father loved his son. I mean, a mulatto, he loved him. And he wanted the best for him, and he realized, if I stay here, he'll never be accepted as a gentleman. So he packs his wife, his daughter, his son, and his mistress, and they all moved to France. And so he insisted on his son being enrolled in Le Boissier's fencing school. And so, Joseph practiced every day and became a great fencer, and some of the other students didn't like it at all. John Adams, the President of the United States, said about him, he knows how to fence, and he is indeed France's greatest fencer. And he was. He went down in history as, at that time, France's greatest fencer. He was also friends with Marie Antoinette. They would get together and have these musical soirees, and her husband didn't like it at all. He was part of the bourgeoisie class. So, Marie Antoinette was beheaded, and her husband, and so they put him in jail too, because he was a part of the bourgeoisie. And of course, this was the time of the French Revolution. And unfortunately, a lot of his music that he wrote, because he wrote lots of harpsichord sonatas, he wrote violin concertos, he wrote some operas as well. And most of it has been destroyed by who? Napoleon. Most of it. Now, there's a resurgence, a renaissance, I guess, in his music. So, People are becoming more involved and interested. As a matter of fact, there's a new film out on the life of Le Sauvage de Saint-Georges. The second album, Charles Pettaway performs music of composers of African descent. And that's a CD. And I did that a couple of years ago, and I introduced some new music by Howard Swanson, his sonata, which is not played often, and then John Cooper, who was a Philadelphia composer. I played his Sonata Fantasy, and there were some other pieces that I can't remember right now, but yeah, that's the second album. I've created a new program for the university, which is an HBCU. It's called Africana Music Studies. I created a couple of years ago a BA, a Bachelor of Arts in Music, and that's the only degree we have, which is a Conservatory Performing Arts degree. And most of the students coming to Lincoln right now are not up to the rigors of that program. So I've been fighting to get some other programs, and the provost told me, we're interested in your Africana Music Studies program. And this program, I'm really excited about it. I wrote it 5 years ago. But I'm rewriting it now because there are new courses. I mean, there are 8 primary courses that would be taught here, along with Lincoln's core, the languages and the math and all that, most colleges do. But these courses include Africana Music Studies, Introduction to African American Music, Harlem Renaissance, Gospel Music, jazz, hip-hop, Philly and Motown sounds, and also Caribbean genres. So they're the 8. And so it's fascinating to look at all of the styles of these different styles of music that come along. And they all have their genesis in Africa and the diaspora. And so how they've come together, people have created different things based on their sociological indoctrination. So this is a good thing, and so that's why I find it so fascinating. And we need another degree program, and so people are listening to me now. Another important thing that I'm working on a book. It's called The Piano, a 21st Century Approach. And I'm dealing in this text with primarily the different styles of music, neo-soul, R&B, jazz, the basic progressions, the 1-4-5 progressions, the 1-6-2-5-1 progressions. I mean, there are certain standard progressions. So it all comes together. So it evolves from the triad, a 3-note chord. It evolves from that. And then what comes out of it now is we have 7th chords, 9th chords, 11th chords, 13th chords. That's it. And so I'm using different progressions to showcase the different characteristics of the styles, of the aforementioned styles that I mentioned. So I'm working on that too. Outside of Lincoln, I love going to the gym, but I hurt my back recently, so I haven't been there in about a month, but I'm going back because that's under control now. And my fish, I've always been interested in aquariums, fresh water, and I've always wanted to get into salt water. But I knew it took a lot of detail, a lot of work to get into salt water. But I decided, just go for it. So I have a 250-gallon aquarium in my family room, and I've got lots of coral, lots of chalices, and then I just got a fabulous clam. It's a Maxima clam, and I'll show you that, because when the mantle is open, it is so incredible. The personal things, I think, historic things, was when I made my debut at the Academy of Music in Philadelphia with members of the Philadelphia Orchestra playing a Mozart piano concerto. Then, when I was in France, I played with the Toulouse Capitol Orchestra and Michel Plasson, who is like 90-something now and is still going strong. I played the Ravel left-hand piano concerto there. And then playing recitals there at the same time and getting standing ovations. I mean, the rhythmic clap, you know. That was the greatest experience of my life, you know. And then having some noted musicians who came to those concerts and who, you know, complimented me. That, yeah, being in France and playing. Oh, and then actually after winning the Kasetsu competition in France, I made a debut at Carnegie Hall too. And so that was a great experience. So yeah, things like that.